Are you looking to get into canning and not sure what you need for equipment? Or are you looking to purchase some canning equipment for a loved one and not sure what to get? Today I'm going to explain the equipment you or a loved one will need when starting to can food at home. It's Jody with All About the Harvest, where I teach you how to grow, use, and preserve your harvest. There are a lot of different gadgets when it comes to canning, but to be honest, not all of them are actually necessary. So today I'm going to cover just the necessary canning equipment and tools that you will need to start canning. I will also have a link to a downloadable guide that you can use with all the extra notes and tips that I'm going to give you in this video. So if you didn't know, there are two different types of canning. There is water bath canning and there is pressure canning. Now, I recommend that people start with water bath canning, and then when they feel comfortable, they progress to pressure canning. You can can different foods with water bath canning than you can with pressure canning. Now, if you want to learn a little more about the differences in these two types of canning, I did create a separate video on that, and I will link that here, and then I'll also link it into the description below this video. That way it's there for you if you want to watch it later. So one of the first things on your list of equipment and tools that you will need when starting to can, you're definitely going to need a canner. So first I'm going to talk about water bath canning and the type of canner that you'll need for that, because again, that's what I recommend that you start with. This particular canner is just a normal stock pot. So this particular stock pot is a 20-quart stock pot. I recommend at least a 20-quart stock pot to start with. The taller the stock pot, the better. So the water has to cover your jars by at least 1 to 2 inches. So the taller the stock pot, the better. Now, not all 20-quart stock pots have the same dimensions. So here's what you want to look for with dimensions regarding your stock pot. You want it to be at least 10.25 inches tall on the inside, and then you want it to be at least 11 inches in width on the inside. And the reason for that is most canning racks are about 11 inches in diameter. And then for the height, by having something that is 10.25 inches, you'll be able to fit quart jars in here with a canning rack and with the water covering it by those at least a couple inches. That's why I recommend that for your minimum size. Now, in the guide that I have and in the description below, I will link a stock pot that does fit those dimensions, and it's also available to be used on all stoves. So induction, gas, flat stove, conventional stove, it can be used on all. And the reason I say that is because not all stock pots can be used on every type of stove. I do have a video that says what you can use for canning on a flat top stove. I will link that up here and again in the description below. However, if you don't want to deal with that right now, just know that the stock pot that I am mentioning will work on any of the stove types out there. So I've linked that in the description below. So, okay, at least a 20-quart stock pot with those dimensions. That particular size will fit 7 quart jars or 9 pint jars. Now, the taller the stock pot, the better. And the reason I mentioned that again was because of the quart jars. But if it's even taller than this, you could fit in even bigger jars in there, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so now for people that are interested in doing pressure canning or going to that next step in canning, then I'm going to recommend a pressure canner. This particular pressure canner that I recommend is the Presto 23-quart pressure canner. This particular pressure canner can be used on all stoves. They do have this model and this size in an induction cooktop model. So if you need that particular model, they have that as well. Again, I'll link both of these in the description below. Now, many people that can foods at home have both the water bath canner and the pressure canner. So it's not unheard of to have both, but if you're a newbie and you're just starting off, you may just start with the water bath canner. But the pressure canner does have some things that can help with your water bath canning. So the nice thing about this Presto 23-quart pressure canner is that it's lightweight. so it's easily movable. It can be used, again, I mentioned, on all stove types. It also is a cost-effective option from a canning perspective. This is a nice quality canner, but it's also not the most expensive on the market, which makes it a nice affordable option. You can double stack pints in this particular model. You can get 2 stacks of 9 pints in here. So you can actually pressure can 18 pints in this particular canner. So I had mentioned that some people water bath can and they also pressure can. One of the things about this particular pressure canner is that you can use it in place of a water bath canner. So if you did not want to get a water bath canner, you could get a pressure canner and use it as both a water bath canner and as a pressure canner. And here are times why I actually do use this as a water bath canner. There are half-gallon jars, and the only thing that you can in half-gallon jars is grape juice or apple juice. But a half-gallon jar is too tall for this particular canner. So a half-gallon jar fits nicely in this particular canner. As you can see, it's taller, and it still allows for that space with the water over the top. So I have used this canner to can my grape juice. So if you were to can with this, just for water bath canning, you would not have the weight on here. You would take the weight off. But what I do, I don't even use the top. So I take this off. And then what I do, I take this top right off, and then I put my water bath canning top right on top. And you can see that that fits perfectly, just sits right on top. And so when I'm water bathing my grape juice in here, I use this particular top. Now, you could use another top that fits that, as long as it fits it. You want to have a cover on it. If you don't have another cover, then you could use this. You just wouldn't put this on top. So the nice thing about the pressure canner is you could actually use the pressure canner as a water bath canner. Now, that being said, I still would recommend a water bath canner because a lot of times I use this to get my food ready before I put it in here. So for example, if I am canning a soup, I might have my soup in here. I'd be heating it up and preparing it in here, and then I fill it in my jars, and then I put it in this particular canner. So I use both. I just wanted to give you that as an option because you could potentially just use this as your water bath canner and as your pressure canner, but it is nice to have both. Okay, so this brings me up to the second thing. So we talked about canners. Now the second piece of equipment that is a must-have is a canning rack. Now, whether you're water bath canning or you're pressure canning, you do need a canning rack. And the pressure canner actually comes with a canning rack. Okay, so here's what the canning rack looks like. I'm just gonna set this back on. Okay, so the Presto pressure canner comes with a canning rack. As you can see, it's a very low profile, and this sits on the bottom of your canner. And you put your jars on here, and this allows for airflow under the jars. It also prevents them from being directly on the bottom of the canner, which can cause the jars to break. So this is needed whether you're canning in a pressure canner or a water bath canner. When you double stack pints in your pressure canner, you will need to get another one of these. So one will be on the bottom, and then one will be between the first set and the second set. So you can order these separately. I got my second one from Amazon. So I use one in here, and then I use another one in here. A canning rack is definitely needed, and I really recommend this because it's very low profile. I'm gonna show you the one that I got before I had purchased this, and it's definitely not nearly as low of profile. And so here's why I recommend this. So this is the one that I had purchased before that, and you can see, probably can see that this is a lot taller. And so when this is sitting in the bottom of my canner, it brings my jars up higher off of the bottom, but it also means they get closer to the top, leaving less headspace at the top. So I actually don't use this one anymore. I only use this one because it provides that additional space and it does a perfect job. They're very inexpensive as well. Now that we're done talking about the canners and the canning rack, I'm going to get these out of the way, and then I am going to bring out the rest of the equipment that a new canner will need when they start canning. If you know somebody that might find this video useful, please go ahead and share it with them. Aside from canning jars and lids, there are only 3 tools that you really need for canning, and they are a jar lifter. So this is a jar lifter. You need these jar lifters to lift your jars in and out of the canner. So these are definitely a must. You need a funnel. And so a funnel actually just goes over the jar, and then you put your food in through the funnel. And what it does is it prevents the food from going all over the outside of your jar and the rim, which is really important. And then the third tool that I find is a tool that I use on every particular canning recipe that I do is this. And this is a bubble remover and a headspace measuring tool. So it is both. So you use this portion to get those air bubbles out around your jar, and then this particular tool helps to measure the headspace in your jar, which is something that you need to follow when you're canning because each particular recipe has a different requirement for headspace. So this headspace tool is really nice. So I found these 3 items in a kit, and I have linked that below. Now, you probably have heard of other things like a magnetic wand. You don't need the magnetic wand anymore because we don't boil our lids anymore. So these are the 3 things that you do need to get. They are a must-have for canning. And like I said, there's a kit with all 3 of these in it. So I have linked that below. Okay, so now the next thing, jars, rings, and lids. So let's talk a little bit about that. Jars come in various sizes, anywhere from 4 ounces to 64 ounces. There are multiple variations of jars within that particular range. So if you're a new canner, I recommend buying brand new cases of jars because they come with the rings and the lids on them already. Now, the jars are reusable, the rings are reusable, but the lids are not reusable. So as a new canner, you're gonna need jars and rings and lids anyway, so just go ahead and get the cases. Generally speaking, they are 12 jars in a case. Now, if for some reason you already have jars, then you'll only need rings and lids, or if you have rings as well, then you just need lids. Now, lids come in boxes like this, and they come in 12 in a box. There are the wide mouth, and then there's the regular mouth, or some people refer to it as small mouth. So these are individual boxes of lids. Remember, lids can only be used once, but if you're completely brand new, you don't have any jars, go ahead and get the case. So the 2 most common size of canning jars are going to be pint size and then the quart size. And then probably the 3rd most common would be the 8-ounce jar, commonly referred to as a jelly jar, but you can actually make more in it than just jam or jelly. And this is what that jar looks like. So this is the 8-ounce jar, and all of them come in the 12-pack cases. If you want to know more about canning jars, rings, and lids, and see the different various sizes, then I have a video where I talk about that. I will link that here, and I'll also put that in the description below so you can check that out later. Now, certain recipes require certain size jars. You can't just can whatever you want in any size jar. If you're unsure of what you will be canning or what your loved one will be canning, I recommend getting a case of quart jars and a case of pint jars to start with. Now, if you know for sure you want to can jam or jelly, then I'd go ahead and recommend getting a case of the jam or jelly, the 8-ounce jars as well. So as I mentioned earlier, jars come in regular mouth and wide mouth. And that is important for you to know because you're going to need to select a regular mouth or wide mouth jar. Now, here is an example of a wide mouth quart jar, and here is an example of a regular mouth quart jar. And as you can see, the regular mouth has more of a shoulder on it, and the top is more narrow than the bottom. And then of course the wide mouth, it's the same. So you can choose regular mouth or wide mouth. I will say that wide mouth jars and lids and rings are a little bit more expensive than regular mouth jars, rings, and lids. People will use the wide mouth for things like pickles, things that you need to get in and out whole. So I personally use these for my pickles, but you can use them for anything. And I have used these for things other than pickles. Now, the 8-ounce jelly jars are generally speaking almost always straight-sided like this, but there are some 8-ounce jars that do have the shoulders as well. Typically, you're gonna find most of them like this. So on this one, it says it's regular mouth, and then on this one, it says it is wide mouth. You'll also notice this is made by Kerr and this is made by Ball. They're actually made by the same company, which is Newell, but this is just a different name brand than this. Both are high quality jars and I would recommend them. You will find some other off brands as well. As long as they're a canning jar or a mason jar, then you are fine to use them. These again are going to be your common jar name brands that you will see most often. Now I did link these jars that I spoke about in the description below, both regular mouth and wide mouth for the pint, the quart, and the jelly jars. You likely are able to get these less expensive at a local store than you can get them from Amazon. I do have a video that I created where I talk about over 20 places where you can find lids and jars, and I will link that video here and I'll also put it in the description below so that you can check that out when you're needing to look for jars. So one of the last couple items that you need to think about when you are a new canner or when buying something for a new canner, you're going to need some canning resources that are safe, tested, and approved. So as I mentioned earlier, you can't just can willy-nilly and put whatever you want in a jar and can it however you want. It is a scientific process and you need to follow approved recipes. So there are many different recipes out there on the internet for canning, but what you need to realize is only certain ones are actually safe, tested, and approved. If you find any recipes by Ball Canning, that is for sure a safe canning resource. Now again, this video is about the very basics that you need. So I'm just going to give you one of the canning resources that I would recommend. And that is called, it's referred to as the Ball Blue Book because it used to be blue originally, but it is no longer blue, but it is called the Ball Blue Book. And this particular book is a really nice guide to canning, but preserving in general. It has a lot of recipes, a wide range of recipes, and it's actually relatively inexpensive. Now, if you go to the store and get your canning equipment at the store, this book, generally speaking, is always right next to the canning equipment. That's another reason I recommend this. But I did link it below for you as well. So I just wanted to recommend that this is a nice canning resource. The recipes in here are safe and tested. You always want to make sure that you use the most up-to-date book. So if your mom or family member has an older version of this, do not use it because these get updated frequently and sometimes they will omit recipes or they will change recipes based on new research. So make sure you get the most up-to-date version. Canning is definitely a process that can be overwhelming at first to new canners, and you definitely want to make sure that you're following safe, tested, and approved processes and recipes. As you can tell, I take canning very seriously. I follow the rules, I do the research, and I stay informed on any of the canning updates that come out. It has become my mission to teach people how to safely can foods using tested and approved processes, procedures, and recipes. So if you're a new canner, you may be interested in my canning course where I walk you through everything step by step. I share all the tips and tricks that you need to know, and I answer any of your questions that you have along the way. We even can food together in the course. At the end of this course, you'll be able to fill your pantry with wonderful home canned foods. So if you're interested in my course for yourself, or maybe you want to give this as a gift to a loved one, I will put a link below where you can learn more about my canning course. If my course is currently not available, then there will be a link to the course waitlist. So if you're interested in purchasing my canning course for a loved one, and you're wondering how to go about doing that, or if you have any questions on how to do that, go ahead and you can email me at allabouttheharvest@gmail.com and put in the subject of the email canning course question, and then go ahead and put in your question and I will definitely be sure to get back to you. I want to make sure that you can get this for your loved one, and I want to make sure to answer any of the questions about that you may have. All right, so for your canning list of equipment and tools, you basically need a canner, you need a canning rack, you need these 3 tools that I mentioned, the jar lifter, the funnel, and the debubbler / headspace measuring tool. You need a reliable canning recipe book. You need jars, lids, and rings. And you will need to make sure you're following safe, tested, and approved canning processes and recipes. Again, I can help you with ensuring that you're following those things. And feel free to use me as a resource and ask me any canning questions that you may have. As a reminder, this is just the bare minimum list to get you to get started with canning. There's definitely more that you can use. And if you have any questions about any other canning equipment, please put that in the description below. I'd love to answer those questions for you. Or if you'd like me to do another video on additional canning equipment, I can do that as well. Just make sure you put a notification in the comments below, and then I will definitely take you up on that. As a reminder, in the description below, I have a link where you can download a guide that talks a little bit more about each of these pieces of equipment and has a link there. And also, all those other videos that I had mentioned while I was talking throughout this video, I have a link to each of those down below so that you can check them out and continue learning. For more food-related tips and tricks, make sure you follow All About the Harvest on Facebook and Instagram. And if you like canning videos like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button so you can get notifications when I release a new video each week. Well, I hope you learned something about the beginner canning equipment that you're going to need. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, this is Jody with All About the Harvest, where I teach you how to grow, use, and preserve your harvest. And until next week, happy shopping.